Your Highnesses, Excellencies, and honoured guests, naysayers will tell you that human beings are too many. We're living on a finite planet with finite resources. There are more and more of us, and so we're living like rats in a pack, our numbers growing, the pack tightening. Nothing could be further from the truth. At 8 billion, as we are today on the globe, we live better, we live longer, we eat better food, we drink safer water, we're more educated, better housed, better clothed than we were when we were 4 billion. And at 4 billion, we lived longer and better than when we were 2 billion. At 2, better than when we were 1. How on earth is this possible? A growing population, more people competing for fewer resources. But as the brilliant American economist Julian Simon said, the brain, the human brain, is the ultimate resource. As there are more of us, we invent more, we create more, and we find better, cleverer ways of using our finite resources. But it's not only that as our numbers grow, we actually live better. Our numbers actually aren't growing very much anymore. Every year, fewer children are born. Every year, the growth of population of the world declines. Every year, the number of countries falling into below replacement fertility, not having enough children to ensure a stable populations, increases. Every year, the number of countries with more deaths than births grows. And every year, we find that the population of the world is going to peak, according to our forecasts, sooner than we previously thought. So we're neither living more diminished, denuded lives, nor is our population really exploding at all. Now, you may think that it would be a good thing if the world's population came down. But when you see population decline in the real, it's not a pretty picture. The school closes. Eventually, the last inhabitant of the village dies. There are too few people in a region for it to be worth investing in its infrastructure. Its roads become rutted, its airports shut. The reality of human population decline is not human thriving, but human shriveling. Now, it used to be the case that this was a rich world, white European problem. No longer. It may surprise you to know that in Colombia, they have barely more children per couple than they have in Canada. That Jamaica has a fertility rate now not that far off Japan's. And that once and recently fertile Philippines have a fertility rate hardly higher than that of France. This is becoming a truly global phenomenon. Now, Korea represents a very good example of what's going on. You can see the population pyramid of Korea as it develops. First, with a large number of young people, but as the young people grow older and don't have children of their own, what we call the population pyramid becomes inverted. The problem is not that older people are living longer. That's a marvelous thing we should celebrate. It's the fact that cohort after cohort is simply not having enough kids. In Korea, which is an extreme example, a cohort of 100 people has so few children that the next cohort that they produce will be barely 40 people, and the cohort that they produce will be barely 16 people. An 84% decline in population in just 2 generations, perhaps 50 or 60 years. Now, Japan doesn't have quite as low a fertility rate as Korea, but it's had a problem for much longer. People often say to me, what's the big deal? Japan had 100 million people back in the 1960s. It will have about 100 million again Back in the 2050s, it's gone up, it's coming down. It was fine at 100 million, it will be fine at 100 million. But the point is the population structure is different. On the way up at 100 million, Japan had 9 people of working age for every retiree. On the way down at 100 million, Japan will barely have 1 worker to support 1 employee. So what does this future look like where people are aging and not reproducing themselves? I like to talk about the 4 greys. Grey labour, grey capital, grey consumer, grey budget. Let's start with grey labour. It's not just that your workforce contracts year on, year out. That's going to cause perpetual recession. After all, the economy is just the number of workers and the hours they work times their productivity. We know productivity rates are growing very slowly in the developed world. So if your population contracts each year, that's a drag on your economy. But it's not only that. Your workforce gets older, and we know that older workforces are less entrepreneurial, they're less innovative, fewer new ideas, fewer new businesses, a declining workforce, an endless drag on your economy. That's grey labour. Grey capital. It's always been the case that older people have held most of the capital in society. But in the past, when you had a buoyant number of 20, 30, 40-year-olds with years of working life ahead of them, they could invest. They had some capital and could invest in riskier ventures. As you get old, as you're not going to earn anymore, you want to move your capital into safe harbours. But that generation is shrinking. And so it's not only that the workforce will have fewer young entrepreneurs and innovators, they will find it harder to raise the capital to make real their ideas, because all the capital will be in the hands of the elderly looking for safe ports. So that's grey labour and grey capital. You also have the grey consumer. Obviously, if a society is getting older, the buyers of products and services are getting older. Now, you'd think that wouldn't be a problem because older people still spend money. But if you've got a labour shortage, younger people who want to buy fridges or cars, those can be imported. An older population requires a lot of hands-on services. And it's going to be decades, if ever, before the robots and AI are going to be able to provide those services. So exactly as your consumer is demanding more people on site to help them, your labour force is drying up. And fourthly, we have the grey budget. It's no coincidence that in Italy and Japan, with the oldest populations in the world, they have among the highest debt to GDP ratios. You have fewer and fewer young taxpayers. You have more and more older people demanding health care. The average 80-something needs 5 or 6 times the spend on health care as the average 20-something. So as their numbers balloon, the demands on the state, if the state is providing health care, grow, and the pensions, and the social care. The young, shrinking cohort are taxed to the point that taxes will no longer raise any further revenues. The old demand vast expenditure, and governments resort to the bond markets. And so governments get more and more indebted. In the last financial crisis, when the financial services sector and financial institutions failed, governments came in as the lender and borrower of last resort to keep the wheels of the economy moving. In the next financial crisis, it's the governments who will be at the front line as the bond markets realize that they're never going to get repaid by these aging populations. And when there's no government there to save the day, the economic consequences could be calamitous. Now, some countries think they can solve the problem by immigration. But as we know, immigrants grow old, don't have large families, and so it becomes a Ponzi scheme, whereby over the years you have to suck more and more people in. You can't do that everywhere if the number of people is reducing. In Britain, for example, we used to have large-scale immigration from Ireland and Poland. But not only a wage differential shrinking, so the motive to come is going, but also the 20-somethings and early 30-somethings in Poland and Ireland are diminishing in number, because these countries too have a low fertility rate. We cannot rely on others to do our breeding are bringing up children and are educating them. Is it right that in Britain, apparently, we have more Ghanaian health workers than in Ghana? What right have established countries like Britain and Spain to rely on others to bring up children because we're too busy, we're too distracted to bring them up, to educate them, to train them, even to the level of doctors and nurses, a huge commitment for a developing country, and then skim them off? The UAE has worked miracles, bringing people from all over the world to create the miracle we have here. But established countries like Britain and Spain have no excuses for skimming off the best and brightest of the developing world, which saps their own ability on the path of development. I do not want to be a counsel of despair, however. There are things that we can do. For a start, there is a role for government. Government should be ensuring there are the conditions in place that young people can start families, whether it's giving tax breaks to people who have kids, whether it's ensuring the housing market is functioning properly so that young people who want to start a family can get on the housing market, whether it's making sure that childcare is available and affordable. Governments can and must do these things. Governments also can change the culture. People say they want children. People in the developed world still say they want to have 2 to 3. But it's not a priority. How can influencers change the world under government guidance so that having kids becomes prestigious, the thing you really want to do, rather than taking that extra holiday or buying that 3rd Rolex? Governments do and can have a role in shaping culture. It's not all on the governments, though. What about businesses? What can business do? Why is it, for example, that when you go to the average office, you're far more likely to encounter a gym than a nursery? How many companies, when they think about bringing people back after COVID and saying how many days you have to work in the office, make a differential between those who are parents of young children and are creating the future economy, and those who don't have that responsibility and could be in the office more often? There are indeed things that governments can do. There are indeed things that employers can do. But finally, there are things that all of us can do. Of course, if you're of the age to have children, you should consider it very seriously. I can tell you as a parent and grandparent, it's the greatest adventure you can ever embark on. And remember, whilst our economy and our society, our nations and our communities rely on a future generation, we're not having children as part of some economic model. We're having them because it's the most wonderful thing to do. And those of us who've had the great joy and pleasure and privilege should be telling people about it, persuading them and encouraging them. All of us can do things to help and support young families. As a grandparent, for example, I spend a lot of my time supporting my children with their children. It's a win-win-win. It's the most joyous thing you could possibly do in your 60s. For the parent, it's a great assistance as they juggle their busy lives, their careers and their family. And it's also very good for the children to have close, meaningful relationships with more than just 2 adults. So government can help address this. Business can address it. We can all address it. But the most important thing is to start talking about it, to recognize it, to understand it. Far too many people still have their heads in the 1960s and think that the global population is exploding. The very opposite is true. We have to understand it, we have to explain it, and we have to act on it. I believe that with patience, determination, but a degree of urgency, we can turn this round. And we must turn it round. Because if we want a human future, we're going to have humans to inhabit it. Thank you very much.